it's all an experiment. And when you look at it that way, it makes it more fun and allows you to try things out without worrying about, quote, failing.
Hello and welcome to the Driven Female Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Melita Campbell, award-winning business coach, value whisperer, and founder of the Dream Clients Blueprint, the proven system that guides you in identifying, communicating, and selling your true value with ease and authenticity so you can work with more of your dream clients and feel proud of the positive impact you are creating. Each week on this show, I quiz successful women about their business journey, the most important lessons they've learned along the way, and I ask them to share some of their expertise with you. My aim is to help you dream bigger and achieve more by learning from what works and gaining tools, tips, and insights from women who are building a range of amazing businesses. If you've ever been curious as to whether a podcast could be the right marketing strategy for you, you are going to love today's episode with Kelly Smith. Kelly is the host of the Podcast Launchpad, co-host of the Geek Girl Soup Podcast, and founder of the Women Podcasters Academy. She's the author of the Amazon bestseller, The Podcast Launch Playbook, and with more than 20 years experience in marketing, Kelly helps women entrepreneurs build their online presence and authority through podcasting. And we've got a great discussion coming up for you all about how you too can build your business through podcasting. So hi Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Melita. I'm so happy to be here.
Me too. And I cannot believe that we have made it to, I've lost track of how many episodes, but way more than 100 episodes. And we haven't talked about podcasting yet. So,
well, congratulations on that many episodes. I'm thrilled for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just got started and I guess I'm just too stubborn to stop now.
Well, that's awesome. Too many people stop podcasting prematurely, and the average is like 7 episodes when people stop.
That's crazy.
They discover that it can be difficult to continue, and I really encourage people to commit to 1 year before deciding if it's really for them. And, we'll talk about that more as we go, but it's so worth it, as you know, to continue and keep it going.
Exactly. And as you say, we'll dig into more about that in just a moment. But before we do that, I would love it if you could share with the audience your journey. So how did you get to be where you are today?
So I started my own business in a different iteration in 2000 when I split from my first ex-husband and needed a job. But my business school marketing professor referred me to a company that needed a marketing consultant. So I started out as a marketing consultant and later became a life coach, tried something different. And now I'm a podcast coach because I left life coaching several years ago and became a podcast coach after clients and colleagues were asking me, how do you start a podcast? Because I've been podcasting for 11 years now. And they would ask me for recommendations for a course. And I'd never taken a course. I just learned by doing. And so I couldn't recommend a course. And so I'm like, I'm going to create my own course and community, and I will teach people in one-on-one coaching. So that's how I ended up where I am today.
So you make that journey sound very straightforward.
No.
Very
No.
Was it as easy as it sounded? And you just think, oh, yes, I'll be a consultant. Sure, no problem.
No, I left out a lot of steps in there. No, I've also acted as a graphic designer. I'm a professional artist on the side. So my entrepreneurial journey actually started when I was 7 and tried to sell paintings at the end of my driveway. And my mother ran out and pulled me inside. It's like, you can't do that. I'm like, but my entrepreneurial spirit. So it's actually ingrained in me. I have been a copywriter. I ghost wrote a book for someone years ago. That's so long ago, I don't even remember what it was. I've written books. What else have I done? I was a website designer. I have just done so many different things. And so no, my entrepreneurial journey is not linear at all. It is a spiral. And that's an issue with like being what they're calling multi-potentiate or, multi-passionate. And it's really tough because like, how do you pick that one thing? And so I've never picked one thing, but the one thing that I do is my overarching theme is I help other people, and specifically whom I've always helped is women entrepreneurs, blaze their own trail. So whatever tools I'm using is still with the ultimate goal of helping women entrepreneurs blaze their own trail. So whether that was marketing consulting, and then it wasn't women entrepreneurs when I first started, I didn't have an ideal client then, but life coaching or website design or copywriting and copy editing, and now podcast coaching. It's always that overarching theme of helping other people create their businesses and their lives in a way that they can do what they want, that they have more freedom and independence. And again, blaze their own trails. That's the phrase I like to use.
Love that phrase. Do you ever feel awkward or fake when it comes to telling people about your business or offers? Or feel disheartened when you do talk about what you do and people just don't get it? Don't worry, you're not alone. Many business owners struggle to confidently and comfortably articulate the true value of what they offer, but it's not something that many people teach as the first rule of business. Yet this one skill sets apart the real business owners from the hobbyists, and when you nail it, you can stop feeling like a fraud. And instead of feeling embarrassed when someone asks how your business is going, you can feel proud to speak of the income, impact, and lifestyle that you have created. You shouldn't feel overwhelmed working all the hours or offering discounts just to make ends meet in your business. If you feel that way right now, I have some good news for you. I've created a masterclass that will teach you exactly how to communicate your true value to your dream clients and how you can use this skill to sell without selling. Once you can articulate your true value with confidence and clarity in every interaction, you'll never be left wondering how to attract enough of the right clients to your business. Access your masterclass at melitacampbell.com/training. It's my gift to you to help you grow in confidence and thrive in your business in 2023. As you're going along that path, and you have these ideas and you listen, well, I'm assuming you're listening to the market and thinking, this is what they need now. I can do that. But at what point do you know to leave one idea and move on to the next one? Is it something that's clear to you? Is it something that kind of blurs into the next thing? How does that work for you?
Part of it, or actually a big part, is listening to my gut. So I fell out of love with life coaching for a bunch of reasons. And I got into website design because I love it. I've always created my own websites, and I was doing some for clients over the years unofficially. I never advertised it. They would just ask me. I'm like, okay, I'll do yours. And then into podcast coaching because I love podcasting and because people asked me. And so then that felt right. My gut was telling me people are asking for this. There's a demand. I love doing it. It really lights me up. So let's do it. I actually didn't do official market research for this. It just felt like if people are asking me for this, then I have an immediate demand right around me. And I love doing it, and I'm good at it. So those three things together made me decide to pursue this avenue. Is it what I'm going to do for the rest of my entrepreneurial life? No, because I've never stuck with one thing. So I imagine that I will switch gears at some point in the future. I have to keep my eye on trends and what will be the next thing after podcasting. I don't know, but there will probably be something, or something else will grab me in several years and tell me I need to pursue that path.
Yeah. And I think that's a great question. It's almost the ultimate entrepreneurial question. It's like, I don't know. Let's see, let's try it. Let's figure this out and just take that next step as it comes, or as it becomes visible in our line of sight. As you say, we don't always know there's something else coming, but we're just looking out for that opportunity and grab it when it comes.
Exactly. It's all an experiment. And when you look at it that way, it makes it more fun and allows you to try things out without worrying about, quote, failing.
Yeah. And well, failing is part of it, really.
Yes.
And we look at people like Richard Branson and say, oh, he's a huge success. But at what really, when you look at just how many failures he's had,
Yes.
you could see, well, actually, his strongest suit is his ability to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And then just move on to the next thing. Oh, that didn't work. Well, let's take those lessons and pack them into the next idea and just keep going. He hasn't let any of those failures hold him back in any way. And because he hasn't let that hold him back, then, it doesn't hold back his brand, his image, anything. So I think we can all embrace that idea and I don't know, let's figure it out. Oh, that didn't work. What's next? And keep going. As you say, that's the exciting part.
Totally. He's the perfect example of that.
So we were chatting before how, when you start a business, we don't ever know where it's going to go exactly, but we have some expectations that this is what's going to happen. This is how it will pan out for us. When you've moved into these new businesses, you've grabbed these new opportunities, did you have those expectations, and did those expectations work out the way you expected?
So my first entrepreneurial job as a marketing consultant, I hadn't planned to be an entrepreneur at that point, since I was looking for a job, and it was my marketing professor who put me in touch with the company that needed the marketing consultant. I didn't have any expectations at that point, but I discovered that being an entrepreneur at that point was easy because I got back-to-back marketing consultant gigs from referrals. So moving from one gig to the next was smooth and easy. I was making enough money to support my business and myself. And again, this was coming right off of a failed marriage. And so it worked out. But I was surprised because you hear about entrepreneurship and how difficult it is. I'm like, oh, this is a breeze. And then I moved from Houston, Texas to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I didn't know anyone. So then it was hard. It's like, how am I going to get work here? And I was a professional artist then too. That was actually easy because Pittsburgh is a smaller market. I got solo shows and group shows right away, but the marketing was tough. And then I moved into online business. Oh my Lord, that was a totally different game. A lot of it is similar, marketing is marketing, but online is different from traditional marketing in many ways. And so it was a different ballgame, and it became a lot tougher. I had to switch gears. I had to learn new skills and techniques. And so my expectations were just blown out the window. And then entrepreneurship became difficult, I hate to say.
You're not alone. We've heard it quite often on the show that people are, oh, I'll start an online business. And then they realize, oh, it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. But again, the challenge we go through to learn those skills, we definitely grow through that. And one thing I've learned, as you know, my background was in traditional marketing as well, mostly in marketing and communication, which is exactly where social media comes in. It's exactly where the internet comes in. Yeah. So it should be easy, but the tools are very different. The tools are very different, and how you show up is different, and how you can make connections is different. I think there's a lot that is the same. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest things I've learned, or two things. One is to remember that it's humans you are speaking to. You're not just putting stuff out there to anyone. It's not one computer speaking to another computer. You're actually speaking to individuals, because they're having an individual experience with you, even more so than traditional media, I think, in some cases. And also just to ask myself the whole time, how could this be simpler? Mm-hmm. Because there are so many ways you can overwhelm yourself very easily. And I've learned, okay, no, let's just do it simpler and then add in later. Simple
Absolutely.
and then grow within that. What's your experience with that? You said, oh my, going online. What have you noticed are the biggest differences and how have you got to grips with that?
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you about what you said about starting simple and adding in later. That was a big mistake I made right off the bat. I was reading everything I could about online marketing, and I was looking at what other successful online business people were doing, and I tried to do it all right off the bat. So every social media platform, for example. And when I became a life coach, I started doing teleclasses right away. This is before Zoom and any kind of webinars or anything. So it was people getting onto a call, a teleseminar, calling into a number and listening to me talk for an hour just on a phone call. And they would do it. But I started doing that just a few months after becoming a life coach. And it was fun. I love public speaking, but it was so much. And you don't have to do everything at once. You need to pick just one social media platform to start out with and really commit to it. Pick one or two main marketing tools to put into place immediately and commit and stick to them consistently, not everything all at once. The people out there who are well established and have thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers, they've been doing this for a while, or they have a big team behind them. Maybe not big, but several people on their team behind them running everything. If you're doing this as a solo entrepreneur, like I was at that time, one person doing everything, you have only a certain number of hours in the day, and most of your time needs to be committed to revenue generating activities and time spent with your clients. So if you're trying to do everything at once, then you're spreading yourself too thin. And I made those mistakes early on and didn't realize it while I was doing it. It took a while to figure out what I was doing wrong and then scale back until I was ready to scale up.
Great advice, and nice that the audience now has permission not to be everywhere. And it's so true. Just start one place, get comfortable, grow with your audience, discover what works, and then branch out from there, and ideally branch out with a team to support you in that. So at what point did you decide to make podcasting part of your strategy? Or was it part of your marketing strategy, or was it just something you were doing for fun?
Oh, it's totally a part of my marketing strategy. So when I started out with an online business, I started a blog very quickly because you need content. You need to be creating fresh content consistently. That means weekly, so that people have something, a reason to stick around on your website, to check you out, to get to know you, like you, and trust you. And from a practical perspective, it helps pre-sell potential clients on you so that when you're doing that sales call, they feel like they already know you. So a blog helps with that. But a podcast is more powerful because they're hearing your voice. They're getting to know your personality. It's really hard for your personality to come out in a blog because it's hard for people to know what your tone of voice is just in writing, no matter how good of a writer you are. I mean, you have to be really, really excellent, especially when you're just sharing information. If it's creative writing, it's a little easier, but sharing information, it's really, really tough. So I made podcasting a part of my marketing strategy in 2012 with a weekly interview-based podcast. And I didn't plan it out strategically enough then. And so I kept that going for only a year. And then honestly, I didn't bring podcasting back in until a year ago. So I've been running one podcast for a year now, and I just started a second one in October that's really specifically about podcasting. So a podcast about podcasting. The first one is about marketing. So I'm very strategic about these podcasts, especially about the one on podcasting. So it is It supports my business completely in reaching a new audience, in boosting my authority in my field, and in helping me get more clients.
So you say now you're more strategic in your podcast, and you have your book and you've mapped out the stages, and the beginning is helping people create that strategy. But for the people that are listening here, what does that look like? What does it mean to have a podcast strategy versus just going out there and sharing value?
So the way that I do my podcast and teach podcasting is that your podcast is one piece of your marketing strategy. It is a tool for marketing your business. So I have another podcast that I've been doing for 11 years with some podcasting buddies, and that's for fun. We're not doing it to promote anything. It's a pop culture podcast. But my current podcasts, and I'll focus on one, the podcast on podcasting, it's very strategic because while it is fun and my priority is to share information to my listeners so they can start and run their own podcast. If I don't get any clients from it, okay, my goal is to help my listeners. But as a marketing tool, I want people to get to know me and to get enough information that then they're like, okay, I want help with this. So I'm going to go to Kelly and get her help, whether it's from her course or from one-on-one coaching. I don't hold back information. So that's one piece of advice I have is you don't hold back your information. You have to be very generous in podcasting. But so that's one, again, piece of advice to use your podcast as a marketing tool, what you share within the podcast. So be very generous in what you share. Let your personality come out completely. So share your emotions, share your story. Don't speak in a monotone. If you do read from a script, don't let the audience know that. Practice so that it does sound like you're being spontaneous, or do try to do your podcast, your solo episode spontaneously. And then outside of your podcast, you want to direct people to your podcast. So feature it on your website, like on your homepage, so that people can use it to get to know you before coming to a sales call. Your podcast can really cut down the time that it takes to go from potential client to actual client. It speeds up the sales cycle because once they start listening to your podcast, they really get to know you, and then they come to you and want to say yes to your offer. They come pre-sold.
Some great reasons there to dive into podcasting. You make a great case there for using it as a marketing tool strategically for your business. Are there any types of people or any types of business that it wouldn't work for? Or is there a point in your business that don't even think about a podcast until you're at this stage? Is there any moment where you think it's perfect for you if fill in the blank?
Right. So there really aren't any types of businesses that it's not good for. I would have to talk with someone individually to see if their type of business wouldn't work for it. I have clients who are authors, great for them. Service-based businesses, awesome. Product-based businesses, it can still work as long as you are not selling your products directly in each episode. You don't want your episodes to be infomercials. So you still need to talk about general topics as well. Good or bad times to start a podcast. Even if you're new to business, you can still start a podcast, even though it is work. I would suggest not starting a podcast and a blog at the same time. Pick one. Now, I advocate for a podcast, of course, because as I mentioned earlier, your audience gets to know you better in a podcast than a blog. You get to reach a wider audience with a podcast because a blog lives only on your website, while a podcast lives on your website on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Amazon, on Google, on all these other podcast platforms, and on YouTube, if you want to share it there as well. So it lives on so many different places. So you're reaching more people, and lots of people want to listen instead of read. Additionally, 80% of podcast listeners finish 80% of more of each podcast episode. In contrast, people spend seconds scanning a blog. So you've got people who are consuming the majority of your podcast. Even though they're multitasking at the same time, they're commuting or they're cooking or they're cleaning or walking the dog, something like that, they're still listening. They're getting something out of it. And again, most importantly, they're getting to know you.
And I've heard it said that people need to experience you for 7 hours.
Yes,
before
that's exactly right.
Taking that next step with you. 7 hours of reading blog posts versus 7 hours of listening to podcasts is quite a different thing. And also, of course, your podcast, in my case, my podcast has become my blog as well. Mm-hmm. So I run the two together and it works out nicely. I do have blog posts on top of that. And because with my podcast, I've had to be more consistent than with my blog, I've definitely seen a huge increase in my search engine ranking as a result of that. So it's been a lot of fun.
Exactly. Yes, your podcast can be your blog, either a separate blog from your podcast blog. I won't get into those details here. Or you can make your podcast posts the equivalent of a blog. So yes, your podcast also basically writes your email newsletter for you. So that's another practical benefit.
Yeah.
If you're struggling to come up with newsletter content every week, put out a podcast every week and you've got the content for your newsletter.
Yes, very true. Now, one thing that was kind of a surprising benefit of having a podcast was, for me, the networking. So yes. I live in a region where English it's not even the fourth language spoken here. It's like way down the list. And I also live in quite a remote region in a forest looking out over the Swiss Alps. It's beautiful, but there's not many people here, lots of goats and sheep. So it's been a wonderful way for me to be able to reach out to inspiring people like yourself, who I would never meet day to day, and say hi and build relationships with other people. Are there any other surprising benefits of having a podcast that you've had from your experience or perhaps through your clients?
Absolutely. And what you just said about the networking is a perfect example. So for my podcast on podcasting called the Podcast Launchpad, I do a solo episode every Monday and an interview every Thursday. And so with the interviews, you can build collaborations with your guests. I've built friendships. You can get referrals. So some of my guests have gotten clients from my listeners, and I've gotten clients from referrals from them. So it's just a fabulous way, again, if you're doing interviews, to meet other people. The podcasting community is so collaborative and generous and friendly and kind. I mean, when you have questions, they're willing to answer. It's amazing. Even though there are so many podcast courses to buy, and again, podcast coaches who want to get paid, we're still answering questions for free. It's amazing. I don't know of other communities like that, who are so open and generous. So yeah, I don't think that was surprising to me because I've been podcasting so long, but I guess it's surprising that it's still like that this many years later.
Yeah, what a wonderful surprise.
Yes.
I love it when you do reach out to other people and as you say, they are open, and why wouldn't they be? And I think that's something that people coming fresh from corporate are always surprised about, just how open the entrepreneurial community is. There are certain pockets and certain industries where they do seem to be a lot more closed, and a bit more secretive. But yeah, certainly in the coaching industry, people are pretty open as well, which is so nice. Yeah.
The podcasting community is just filled with abundance, I've found, and I just love that about it.
Yeah. And collaboration, as you pointed out, most podcasts thrive on collaboration, which is nice. And again, it's more fun.
Yes.
So you said right at the very beginning, and before we came online, I was like, well, isn't it something like 50% of podcasts that never make it past their 10th episode? And you're like, no, it's 90% that don't make it past their third episode.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
So many people who start a podcast discover that it takes work. It takes more work than a blog because you're not just writing the content, you're recording, you're editing, or you're paying someone to edit. There are more steps to doing it. And you're not going to see, in most cases, an immediate return on investment, if you will, but you don't with a blog either. But people have this unreasonable expectation that, oh, if I start a podcast, I'm going to get a bunch of followers and a bunch of downloads right away, and I'm going to get a bunch of clients right away. But as you pointed out, it takes 7 hours of people consuming your content before they're going to be interested in buying from you. And still not everyone after consuming your content for 7 hours is going to buy from you. It just takes that long before they start to. So it takes time to build a following and those downloads and getting clients. So you have to be patient with the process and you have to be prepared for that work. But there are systems that you can put into place. So when you go into it, setting up those systems ahead of time, for example, batching when you record and when you edit. You don't have to work on your podcast every week, except for the promotion. You have to promote every week. And even that you can schedule. But you can record and edit once every 2 or 3 weeks, and then have a 2 or 3 week break when you schedule in advance. So it's totally doable. You just have to plan ahead of time.
You mentioned there about the promotion. You have to promote every week and you have to build your audience, and it will take time to build your audience. It's, all of these kind of strategies, they're farming strategies. So you plant the seed, you nurture it over time, and then, the right people come forward. Do you have any advice on the best ways to promote your podcast? Is there a best practice? Absolutely do this. Or is it different for every podcast and every podcaster?
There are some slight differences depending on your audience, but let me say the one piece of advice that I like to give is, of course, you're going to share on social media. I suggest so if your podcast is audio only, then I suggest creating audiograms, and that's where you have the words coming up and they're moving, and everyone has seen these. It's just kind of hard to describe. And the little waveform is there moving, and you would share that on Instagram, for example. So that gives people a visual to look at and listen to. Very short, no more than 60 seconds. You don't want to write, check out my latest episode. Nobody cares. Even people who are already following your podcast, they don't care on social media. Hey, here's my latest episode. You want to hook when you share your latest episode on social media or in your email. You want to ask a question. That's usually the most powerful way to share your episodes. Ask a question that's either the title of your episode. I tend to write my titles in the form of a question, or a how-to, or a why you, something like that. But questions on social media are extremely powerful. They engage people right away. They start thinking about the answer and they want to know the answer. Then at the end of the social media post, you write, check out the full episode, link in bio. That's the end of the post. You don't write it at the beginning. New people, people who aren't already listening, definitely don't care. So you want to hook them with this new information for them. And at the end, hey, full information is in the episode, link in bio.
Yeah. So get their attention, give them a good reason to listen, but only part of the reason. So you have to listen to get the full story. Yeah. Yes. Fantastic. I have to admit, I'm not sure that when promoting my show, I've ever used questions. I'm going to try that. Let's see.
Yep.
I'll
Awesome.
report back on the difference. So your podcast launch playbook, I was reading through it, and I love how you've really broken it down, but made it really simple to follow through. And with the time, as you mentioned, it takes longer, and you've actually detailed for your different podcasts exactly how much time it takes. And I think that's definitely something that a lot of people underestimate. Is there anything else or one big thing that people need to think about or understand before they launch their podcast?
I suggest that you figure out your big why for having a podcast. So there are all of these practical reasons that I went through today. And I also suggest having an altruistic why. So what I mean by that is a listener-focused why. So I think I mentioned earlier that my main focus is on helping my listeners learn how to podcast and use their podcast to market their business. That's my big why for having this podcast, the Podcast Launchpad. Even if it doesn't lead to clients, that's why I do that podcast. Now, the practical reason is to get clients or students into my Women Podcasters Academy. But my big why is to help my listeners. They are my focus. They are my priority. Everything I do on the podcast is to help them. So that's the first thing that I suggest for anyone considering starting a podcast is figure out the why that's based on your listeners, and then figure out a big why that's more selfish, that's based on your business. Like, how will it help your business?
I love that. And that's something that I always tell my clients when they're starting a business. And in fact, going through your book contents list, even, it's almost like how to launch a business. They're very similar. Yeah, I always say have your big why and your client facing why, and then you also need the selfish why. You can't just be giving the whole time. There has to be something in it for you. Otherwise, you won't show up consistently. Right. And as you said, podcasting is hard work. So there has to be something in it for you as well. So I love that advice. Ellie, you've shared so much value. I've really enjoyed this conversation, but is there anything else that you feel we haven't touched on when it comes to maybe marketing or podcasting, or just having the courage to go out there and start your business and see where it takes you?
Mm-hmm. With podcasting, so I hear from so many women, 2 reasons that they don't start a podcast. One is they're afraid that they don't have anything to say or that no one will want to listen to them. And the second reason is they don't know how to get started or what they need to do. And so for that first reason, you do have something to say, and there are people who will want to listen to you, who want to listen to you right now. You are totally unique. Even if you talk about things that other people are talking about, no one is saying it the way that you will say it, with your personality and your perspective. So I challenge you to come up with a podcast that will be unique to you and unique to the world. And for the second one, you don't know how to get started or how to do it. To quote Marie Forleo, figure outable. You can do it. All of the instructions are out there, and you can learn anything that you don't currently know. And you can outsource anything that you don't want to learn. Absolutely.
As you say, it takes time, but I think we were saying before that starting a business, it's both easier and harder than you think.
Yes.
Easier because everything you're worried about and holding you back just isn't a problem once you actually get started, and harder because there's a lot of things that you haven't realized that you have to figure out yet. But ignorance is bliss, and it's kind of the same with podcasting. But I am not big on technical anything. I am the shy girl. I've written books about that, and I kind of feel if I can start a podcast and have it going this long, then anyone can do it, and it is actually a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, not being a technical person, there are books and courses and people to guide you along every step of the way. You don't have to go Google all of the individual steps and read this blog and this article and that article. You can find all the steps written out in one place, not just my book or my course or me. You can go pick anyone else you want to. They're all out there for you.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that your book really is excellent, and it gives you just the information you need and none of the extra fluff that's going to slow you down. And it's very open and clear and encouraging. So yeah, I would recommend
Thank you so much
with that.
Thank you. Welcome. I appreciate it.
So Kelly, if people want to know more about your podcasts or how to work with you or anything more about your story, what's the best way for them to find you?
Everything is at my website at AngelaKellySmith.com. My parents always called me Kelly, so that's what I go by, but the whole thing is AngelaKellySmith.com.
And all one word.
All one word. Yeah, no dots or dashes or anything. AngelaKellySmith.com.
Brilliant. Kelly, thank you so much for really just sharing so much value and encouragement with the audience today. And I'm looking forward to following your new podcast.
Thank you so much, Melita. I really appreciate being here today.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you took away as much value as I did. And if you enjoyed the show, then I'd love it if you leave a review on iTunes and share this podcast with your network and business besties. There are a lot more tools, tips, and insights coming up for you in the next episode, so don't miss next week's podcast. Or better still, subscribe now so you never miss your weekly dose of inspiration. I've been Melita Campbell, business coach and value whisperer, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode.